Hello, and welcome to this webinar on the Assistive Technology Guidance Manual. Today's session is going to be focusing on using data. And so I'm going to turn off just a couple things so that we get a little bit of a better recording. But my name is Brian Wocjik, and I work as coordinator of the Special Education Assistive Technology Center here at Illinois State University. Just to get started, I wanted to go ahead and give a little bit of background about the Illinois Assistive Technology Guidance Manual. The manual came about through a number of different means, but specifically it was a grant awarded to Infinitec, who extended a subcontract to the Special Education Assistive Technology Center here at Illinois State University. The manual was developed with a lot of different input. We had a series of focus groups that had school administrators, school-based assistive technology service providers, special ed teachers, school technology staff, policymakers, and pre-service teacher education faculty. We also conducted an exhaustive literature review, and then we reviewed state guidance documents from all of the states that had published documents related to assistive technology services. From that work came the Illinois Assistive Technology Guidance Manual. The purpose of the manual is to provide guidance to school systems about how to provide effective AT services to students with disabilities. And so there's a lot of information in there. Today's session is going to focus on the pieces of the manual that specifically focus on using data in the assistive technology process. You'll notice that the contents of the manual vary and have information regarding, basic information regarding things like understanding assistive technology and understanding how it relates in the law. But you'll notice that the center section here that focuses on understanding assistive technology in the assistive technology process, this is where we're going to spend a bulk of our time today. So let's go ahead and get started. When we focus on interventions, because that's really what we do in education, is we provide interventions. Most of the time we talk about instructional interventions, and instructional interventions are such that they allow by putting that intervention in place, it allows the student to learn a new skill. And after that intervention is taken out of place, the student maintains that skill over time. The second type of intervention that we talk about are compensatory interventions, and assistive technology often comes about under this compensatory intervention. So again, instructional interventions are specifically designed to teach or add new skills to a student's skill base. And we measure their performance against previous performance. So for example, if we are talking about teaching somebody to multiply with greater fluency, so we're teaching basic types of skills, we may start off by taking baseline assessment data, and that baseline assessment data may sit there and say they're able to do X amount of problems within a certain amount of time. And we start that, and then we do an intervention. And by doing that intervention, we hopefully see growth towards an expected performance level. When we stop doing that intervention, it might be things like playing around the world, or it might be doing math flashcards because we're working on fluency and that automaticity of mathematical multiplication. When we stop doing that intervention, we hope that the student maintains those skills over time. And this is the crux of an instructional intervention. Notice that we are measuring the student's performance based upon previous performance that was recorded in previous sessions. And so we're constantly measuring how the student is progressing. When we look at compensatory interventions look a little bit different. They, first and foremost, compensatory interventions are designed to compensate or bypass the area of difficulty. So, for example, the classic, when we talk about assistive technology, the classic compensatory intervention are glasses. I am able to put on a pair of glasses, and my visual acuity tends to improve. When I take those glasses off, I am no longer able to see as well as I did with the glasses on. The glasses bypass or get around my eye's inability to bring things into focus. When we use compensatory interventions, it enhances the student's performance without necessarily increasing the student's skills. Again, when we're talking about those glasses, just because they put the glasses on doesn't mean that my eyes have learned to do anything differently. The glasses are helping to compensate for what my eyes cannot do on their own. When we measure performance using compensatory interventions, we're constantly measuring the performance using the intervention versus not using the intervention. That's one of the reasons when you go to an eye doctor, they measure how well you can see with the glasses versus how well you can see without the glasses. And they measure the gap, and that helps determine whether or not the intervention still is needed over time. So, when we look at measuring for a compensatory intervention, you're going to see three lines here. The green line, or the top line, represents the expected performance on a task. The red line, or the bottom line, represents the performance that the student has not using any type of compensatory intervention. The blue line is measuring the performance on the task using the compensatory intervention, the blue line or the middle line. And what we see here is that while there still is a gap between what the student can do by themselves and where they are expected to perform, by using some sort of compensatory intervention, the student eventually begins to approximate performance where we want them to perform, even though without that intervention, they're not able to do it. So I'd like to review the assistive technology process, and this process is outlined in detail within the Illinois Assistive Technology Guidance Manual. The assistive technology process within the manual focuses on four areas. Consideration of assistive technology, that beginning, does the student need assistive technology? Is the student a viable candidate? And if so, what assistive technology might the student need? Provision of assistive technology, this is the process, this becomes the funding process. How do we actually get the assistive technology that the student needs into the student's hands? Implementation of assistive technology, in other words, what are those supports that need to be in place in order to successfully implement the assistive technology? Things like training, things like ensuring that we have a plan. When does the device need to be charged? Who's going to take care of it? When and where does the device need to be used? Does the device go home? If so, what is the plan to get it home and back to school? And things like maintenance of the device. That's part of the implementation plan. And then the final portion of this AT process is the performance monitoring. As a student is using it, what difference does that assistive technology make? Assistive technology is a compensatory intervention, so we do have to measure the student's performance with the assistive technology and without the assistive technology. So, and then we eventually go back to consideration, and you can see that this process is cyclical. So where does data begin to enter into this process? Well, it really enters into in two primary places: the consideration of assistive technology and the performance monitoring of ATUs. You'll see elements of data in the other two places, but really these are the two places in which you will see a crux of the data. So let's take a closer look at assistive technology consideration. In assistive technology consideration, we have two primary questions. Is assistive technology needed for the student to make reasonable progress and achieve FAPE? And if the answer to that question is yes, what assistive technology is needed? Let's take a look at this process in a little bit more depth. In the Illinois Assistive Technology Manual, this flowchart is there. And we start with a very specific piece. We look at the information that is currently known about a student. And we decide from that information what are the IEP goals and objectives that are necessary for the student to make reasonable progress in his or her educational program. At some point when we're talking about assistive technology consideration, we have to ask the question of, can a student perform the tasks necessary to meet the IEP goals and objectives and make reasonable progress in the curriculum without any technology-based compensatory supports, otherwise known as assistive technology? Lots of words. If the answer is yes, We do have to make sure that the IEP team has the necessary knowledge in order to make this choice. But if the answer is yes, then we document that and we move on. If the answer is no, again, we need to make sure that the IEP team has the necessary knowledge in order to make that decision. If the answer is no, the student cannot make progress without those technology-based compensatory supports, we go through a period that may lead us through to doing an AT evaluation. So let's take a look at the pieces of this where data and that idea of bringing in data and reviewing and analyzing data come into play. Two specific areas. First, we need to look at data when we are reviewing the current information about the student. Sometimes that's new data, sometimes we're looking at data that has been collected over a period of time. Second, if we go through the process and we decide that the student is unable to make reasonable progress without technology-based compensatory supports like assistive technology, in other words, assistive technology, and the student is not currently using assistive technology and we have no additional information, we may need to go ahead and conduct that assistive technology evaluation. And there is data collection that occurs at that point as well. So, when we look at reviewing current information about the student, we need to decide what information do we know about the student. And we're going to look at a variety of different pieces of data. One of those might be generated from norm reference or criterion reference assessments. And those might be given as part of an initial evaluation or reevaluation. They may be given by independent evaluators, but those pieces of information need to come into place. Curriculum-based measures are also important pieces that will give an idea about what types of tasks are the student expected to do and which tasks are they having difficulty with. Observational data is also very important, and getting observational data from multiple different areas is also very important as well. Interviews. Who do we interview? We interview the student. The student's perspective is very important in all of this. We interview the parents. We interview anybody who works with the student, from teachers to paraprofessionals and to therapists, to really anybody who works with the student, and then other assessment data that may be available. It's important to understand that in thinking about assistive technology consideration, there is no one protocol or one data source that we look at and to decide whether or not assistive technology is needed. We look at information that has been collected about the student. If that information isn't readily available, or that information doesn't answer the question whether or not the student needs assistive technology, and by proxy, if yes, what information is needed in order to determine what assistive technology is needed, then we may need to collect additional information, and that gets into an AT evaluation. In conducting an AT evaluation, a couple points need to be made. An AT evaluation does not need to be conducted by an assistive technology specialist, although it could be. It needs to be conducted by an individual or individuals who has knowledge about the student, knowledge about human functions. In other words, what are those things that a student needs to do in order to perform various tasks that they are expected to do, and knowledge about the potential assistive technology and AT services a student may need. In other words, if we are focusing on a student who is having difficulty in reading, we need to have somebody who is knowledgeable about what the student can do in reading, knowledgeable about what it takes in order to perform the various tasks that are associated with reading, and knowledge about potential assistive technology and AT services that may be used in order to help the student on those reading tasks. In conducting an AT evaluation, we're going to take into account any information that we currently have, but we may also conduct a variety of activities such as a task demand analysis, a feature match analysis, a tool demand analysis, and tool trials. Task demand analysis sits there and says, if a student was to do the task that in which they are having difficulty, if they were doing that task in a typical way, what type of skills, cognitively, physically, linguistically, does the student need to have in order to effectively complete that task? By doing that, we can then assess which of those skills the student is having difficulty or doesn't currently have in their repertoire that might be causing the issues in and preventing them from completing that task. Once we have that information, we can look at the nature of the task, we can look at those difficult task demands, and develop features of potential tools that are necessary that would help the student complete that task. Then, as we go out and we look at various tools, we can match those features with the tools and decide which tools best meet the features that we are seeking. We then also may need to do a tool demand analysis. Does the student have the prerequisite skills in order to operate the tool? If the tool requires vision in order to operate and the student does not have adequate vision, it's going to make it very difficult for the student to operate that particular tool. Finally, we need to engage in tool trials. Tool trials are short periods of time, and that time is relative to the type of technology and the nature of the student. But tool trials are periods of time in which we try a particular technology and see whether or not it makes a difference. This is very much akin, I'm going to go back to that idea of going to the eye doctor. A lot of times you get a new set of glasses or contacts, and there is a bit of a trial period to make sure it is a match and it is doing what is needed. If not, we go back to the drawing board, we do some additional measurement, and we then have a new set of new prescription and a new set of glasses or contacts that we try out, and we go through that, and we collect data to determine whether or not it is actually making a difference. I'm going to focus most about data collection during those tool trials. So in 2000, Roger Smith, who works up at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, proposed this approach. It's called a time series concurrent and differential approach. And it's a lot of words to basically say that we are going to measure a student's performance for a particular task using assistive technology and not using assistive technology, and then we're going to compare those two sets of data. Those two sets of data will then tell us different pieces of information about whether or not the assistive technology is effective. In this initial consideration stage, there are a couple key questions we need to ask. First, on what task will the student be using the assistive technology? We need to define that so that we know on what tasks we then need to measure the student's performance. Second question, what is the behavior we're trying to measure? In other words, by using the assistive technology, what is the performance that we are hoping to see change? Are we looking at things like fluency? Are we looking at accuracy? Are we looking at duration of on-task behavior? Lots of those types of things. And that will lead us to what is the unit of measurement. The unit of measurement is always a ratio. It is something observable and reliable over some common denominator. And I'll talk about this a little bit more. And then finally, we need to decide what is the frequency of measurement. I would venture to say that in this initial consideration phase, we tend to measure more frequently than later on when we are in that implementation stage, where we may measure still regularly but less frequently. So developing that variable to measure. Again, this is a ratio. It's some behavior that is observable and measurable that relates specifically to the performance goal that we're trying to get over some common denominator. We need to set up a ratio that allows us to compare apples and apples. Certain things like percentages, if it's not based off the same type of probe, we're not really measuring apples and apples. We're measuring apples and oranges. So let me give you, for example, if I'm looking at using text-to-speech in order to help a student's rate at which they are able to access text. So I can sit there and say that, no, let me take that back. Say, for example, I'm looking at using spelling, a spell correction program, and I'm looking at being able to measure the student's performance in terms of spelling accuracy using a particular assistive technology like spell check, which can be an assistive technology, versus not using spell check. So what I'm going to do is set up a variable that allows me to measure this. So one thing I can look at is number of words spelled accurately over 10 words written. By doing that, every time I take a probe, I'm always measuring the number of words spelled accurately over 10 words written. If I was looking at a percentage and said 70% accurate, unless I had that ratio set up in the background, that might look different. On one product, the student might have 53% accuracy, but it's out of 100 words. On another product, they might have 75% accuracy, but it's out of 4 words. It's not comparable. So we need to set up this variable to measure to make sure that we are always comparing apples and apples when we are taking our measurement data. Consideration questions. When we're looking at this initial phase, we're thinking about how effective is the assistive technology tool or system that we want, and is it doing what we want to do? So we have 2 questions. Is the proposed AT tool or system effective? And then as we try different tools and systems, we need to compare the relative effectiveness to determine which one is most appropriate for the student. Let's take a look at a couple scenarios. First and foremost, in this scenario, we are looking at measuring the performance not using assistive technology. That's what the bottom line or the red line represents. And we're measuring that across time. Eventually, we're going to introduce assistive technology, and it's going to look something like this. This is one possible scenario. In this scenario, we're going to look at, is the assistive technology making a difference? And so if we look at this, you're going to see that the performance without the assistive technology still shows a gap between what the student can do without versus what we are expecting them to do. But in using the assistive technology, the student's performance during this time period is approximating where we want them to go. So this particular scenario shows that the assistive technology may be a viable solution. So let's take a look at another scenario. In this scenario, the student's performance with and without the assistive technology is approximately the same. And that performance is, there's a gap between where they are performing both with and without the assistive technology and where we would want them to perform. Therefore, we would sit there and say this assistive technology isn't necessarily effective. Let's take a look at this scenario. Remember, in doing assistive technology tool trials, you typically compare more than 1 or 2 systems. So here we have 3 different tools or systems. We have System 1, which is the first blue line towards the bottom, System 2, the second blue line towards the bottom, or System 3, the third blue line, which is right on top. In System 1, we could conclude that this technology is not viable. It's not providing enough compensatory benefit to allow the student's performance to approximate where they should be. System 2, we can sit there and say this is more of a viable solution. It provides enough compensatory support to allow the student to approximate where they should perform. System 3 also is a viable solution because it allows the student to approximate where they should perform, but it also goes above and beyond where the expectations were the student should perform. Now we have a decision to make. We have 2 and 3 as both viable solutions, but which do we choose? And there are a couple schools of thought on this. One key term is the idea appropriate. We have a court case, Rowley. It's often referred to as Rowley, and Rowley says we need to provide interventions that allow students a basic floor of opportunity to make reasonable progress. In doing so, we are only providing enough so that they make enough progress that is expected. Based on that scenario, we may choose System 2. However, keep in mind we're at a consideration phase. In other words, the likelihood is the expectation of performance is going to change over time and probably become more difficult. So over time, will System 2 be a viable solution 6, 9, 10 months down the road, or would System 3 be a better solution? And we'd have to weigh pros and cons in order to allow that to occur. Let's take a look at another scenario that happens during consideration. Notice specifically what happens at this point in the scenario. You can see that the performance with and without the assistive technology are basically the same, and in fact the performance with the assistive technology actually dips a little bit. This can happen for a number of different reasons. The student is learning how to use assistive technology. The assistive technology isn't exactly inviting for the student, so the student becomes disengaged and their performance is actually worse using it for a while until they understand that there might be a bit of a benefit to it. And eventually the assistive technology shows itself as a viable solution. What is frustrating, I think, a lot of times for IEP teams is what is the period between the two black bars? How do we know that we're going to eventually hit a trajectory in which we would see that assistive technology being viable? And oftentimes what I tell IEP teams is it really depends on the nature of the student and the nature of the task, and even to an extent the nature of the assistive technology. The more complex the assistive technology, the more time needs to be invested before you might see a return on that investment. Students may need more time to become acclimated to using that assistive technology, or may need more time kind of buying into the concept. And this will vary depending from student to student. If we were looking at a pencil grip, we may see a very short time, 1 hour even, before we start seeing return on our investment. If we're looking at something like an augmentative communication device or a speech recognition system, that period of time might be actually a lot longer. So it's important to understand that that time may vary depending on the student and the nature of the assistive technology and the nature of the task. So we're leaving now assistive technology consideration and moving into that progress monitoring of assistive technology use. We're still going to use that time series concurrent and differential approach, but now we're going to expand it out across longer periods of time. One of the questions, and I'm going to back up real quick, is what is the ratio between the number of times that I measure with the assistive technology versus the number of times that I measure without the assistive technology? Recommended practice is there and says 5 to 1. So I would measure 5 times with to 1 time without. And during the consideration phase, that frequency is probably a lot closer together and a lot and much more frequent. So I may be doing 2 to 3 measures with assistive technology a week and 1 measure without over a 2-week period. When I move into progress monitoring, now we're looking at the student has the assistive technology. We've decided that's the system that they're going to use. It's been provided to them. We have implementation in place. We've gone through training and all that type of stuff. Now we're looking at their performance use long term. Now I'm still going to use that 5 to 1 ratio, but it might be 5 data points with the assistive technology in a quarter or in a half year. So we're looking at a frequency that is a little bit more spread out. Does that make sense? When we're looking at progress monitoring of assistive technology use, our questions change a little bit. We're no longer looking at, is the assistive technology making a difference for the student, and which assistive technology tool or system do we use? We're looking at, is the assistive technology still working over time? Is the assistive technology still needed? And this other question, are there any anomalies or concerns? Is there anything happening with the data that we can't explain? And if we do look at that and are able to explain it, are those changes something that are acceptable? So let's take a look at a couple scenarios. Notice here that our goal line, or the green line, the top straight line, is now slanted. Typically, performance on a task, those expectations change over time and typically become more and more difficult. In other words, the expectations become higher. So in looking at the scenario, we notice that at the end of this phase, which might be over a year's time, we still notice that there is a gap between the students' performance without the assistive technology and where the student is expected to perform. We also notice that the student's performance continues to approximate expected performance when using the assistive technology. So let's go back to our questions real quick. Is the assistive technology still working or still needed? Yes. The student is unable to perform at the expected performance level without the assistive technology. Second question, is the assistive technology still working? In this scenario, yes. The student is still approximating the expected performance level with the assistive technology, so it is still working. Are there any anomalies or concerns? Are the anomalies, concerns explainable or acceptable? Is there anything weird about this data? The student uses assistive technology and approximates that expected performance level, doesn't use it, doesn't approximate, there's still a gap. This is a fairly clean case. So let's look at some cases that might not be so clean. In this scenario, we have a couple different things going. Let's go through our questions. Is the assistive technology still needed? In other words, is there still a gap between the student's performance without the assistive technology and where the student should be performing? The answer here is yes. Second, is the assistive technology still working? Is the student's performance while using the assistive technology still approximating where the student should be? And for all intents and purposes, yes. So it is still working per se. Are there any anomalies or things that are going on? Well, here's a couple different things. The student's performance without the assistive technology is actually decreasing over time. Now we have to sit there and figure out, can we explain this? And there may be a number of different variables. One variable might be that the student's condition has deteriorated over time, and so their residual skills are no longer what they were at the beginning of this time period. Therefore, they tend to rely more on the assistive technology because their own performance without the assistive technology has degraded. We can look at changes in environment. We can look at that the assistive technology has now begun, the student has become much more dependent on that assistive technology, and so their performance without the assistive technology has degraded over time. Let me give you a for example. Let's go ahead and go back to spelling, and we can talk about spelling accuracy. If a student becomes over-reliant on using spell check, it is conceivable that their own thinking about spelling will become less automatic. And so when we test spelling accuracy not using that assistive technology, their performance may actually look different the more that they become dependent on the assistive technology. Now we have to decide, is that acceptable? In some cases we might sit there and say yes. In some cases we may not, we may say no. If we're working with younger children where we want to continue providing instructional interventions to increase spelling accuracy, this is not a good scenario. If we're working with a junior in high school in which we, as an IEP team, have already begun to decide we're going to focus more on compensatory and lifelong skills, this might be something that is acceptable. And again, this is a case-by-case basis. Let's look at another scenario. This is what I call our dream scenario. In this scenario, we're talking about a scenario in which the student has, in essence, remediated. So let's go through our list. Is assistive technology still needed? Well, when I look at this, at the end of this time period, the student's performance without the assistive technology is approximating not only what they can do with the assistive technology, but is also approximating where they should be performing. So the answer to that is no. we don't necessarily need to go on from there. Is the assistive technology still working? Yes. Are there anomalies or different things? Well, we see that the student's performance has remediated. This is a dream scenario. We would then withdraw the assistive technology and hope that the student's residual skill would be able to maintain and meet the demands that are placed on them for performing on this particular task. In this particular scenario, we have some other things going on. The students' skills without the assistive technology have continued to improve. However, they are still not approximating where they should be performing. So is assistive technology still needed? Absolutely. Is the assistive technology still working? Well, let's look at that middle line. You can see at the end of this time period that the assistive technology is not allowing the students' performance to approximate where they should be, so it's not working. So what do we do at this point? We sit there and say we need to reconsider what's happening with this assistive technology. Do we need to use the technology different? Do we need to look at potentially a different tool or system? And we need to explain what's going on here. And we re-enter that consideration phase at this point. One last scenario to throw at you. And this is, we talked about the dream scenario. This is the horror scenario. Let's go through our questions. Is assistive technology still needed? Absolutely. The student's performance without the assistive technology doesn't allow them to perform where they need to based on expectations. Is the assistive technology still working? Well, at the end of the scenario, the student's performance without the assistive technology is not allowing them to approximate where they should be. This is a problem. So we have to figure out what happened right in this center point where that declination started. This might be a change in environment, it may be a change in student, it might be that the assistive technology itself became unreliable, it might be that the tasks, the expectation on the task exceeded what the assistive technology was able to do, and so we start looking at this abandonment of the assistive technology. But we need to be able to explain. If I saw this scenario, I would really like to try and figure out what's going on way before the end of this period, which is one of the reasons that we do constant progress monitoring. So as we start seeing this decline in the student's ability to perform on the task, we can look at that point and figure out what is going on and can we tweak things differently. So this, one of the things that I hear from a number of individuals is this can be a lot of data collection. Well, when we look at how to do this, the SEAT Center, the Special Ed Assistive Technology Center at Illinois State University, has actually put together a tool to try and help in this process. And we've devised it using Microsoft Excel so that it is easily accessible and available and easy to use. So let me go ahead and switch over to this tool and I'll show you how it works. And so we have this, if you link over here, and this is in the Illinois Assistive Technology Guidance Manual. But if you look over here, you can go to seat.illinoisstate.org/Excel, and I'm going to point you to this very center one, the Compensatory Intervention Measurement System. So give me a moment to go ahead and launch this and bring it up in Excel. It's going to download real quick, and then I'll go ahead and launch it. And let me go ahead and bring it over into the view that you all can see. And this is what the system looks like. The Compensatory Intervention Management System, this is done under Creative Commons, and if you would like to tweak this in any way, shape, or form, just contact either of the two people noted down here and we'll go ahead and give you the password to alter the file. The first thing that you do is put in the student's name. You put in the goal statement, increase spelling accuracy to 9 accurate words for every 10 that are written. We talk about the intervention. We're going to use spell check. And then we're going to measure the number of words spelled correctly over 10 words written. And we have that information. We can then go to the data entry sheet, which is on the second tab, and we can put in our data. So we can put in actual dates. I'm just going to put in day numbers. And we can put in our numbers and that we have measured with and without that intervention. So on the second day, let's say we'll do without intervention. You got 2 words, and then we did another one around the 6th day, and you got 3 words. We went ahead and measured with the intervention. You got 5 words here, you got 7 words here, you got 6 words here. We skipped, you got 8 words here, you got 9 words here, you got 8 words here. Our goal, if you remember, was 9 words. That's what we're trying to go for, so we'll put that in as well. And I'm a firm believer that numbers need qualifiers, so there's a whole note section. So if, for example, a student comes in sick on the day that you do the probe, you can go ahead and note that so you have a context for how those numbers were generated. And if you click on the third tab, you'll notice that it automatically graphs it out. Here's our goal line. Here's the performance with the intervention, the performance without. And we can sit there and say, is assistive technology still needed? Absolutely. There's what the student is able to do without versus with is different, and the assistive technology seems to be working. We'll want to go ahead and monitor that over time and take a look at what's going on. So this tool is freely available, and again, it's located at seat.illinoisstate.org/Excel, and click on the Compensatory Intervention Management System Excel sheet. And again, if you would like to be able to tweak the file in any way, shape, or form, just email either Brian Wocjik or Nora Barty, and we will go ahead and give you the password to tweak that. This is the point in which I would typically ask if there are any questions, but since we are doing this as a clean recording, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. My email is B as in boy, WWOJCI@ILST as in Tom, U.edu. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope this was beneficial, and I hope you are able to take this information and apply it in meeting the assistive technology needs of the students with whom you work.